Do only the strong survive? We're going to do a little experiment to see if that is indeed the case. Let's just see if that's the case. What I need everybody to do here is to partner up. Find someone and partner up. Hopefully we have an even number of people in the room. We definitely need 2 people. Okay. You definitely need just 2. Okay? Has everybody got one partner? We're all good there? It was really nice to see people like, oh, we can be a triad. And normally you could, but not in this case. We really need 2 people. All right. Will the person decide amongst the 2 of you who is the strongest of the 2? Physically the strongest of the 2. All right? All right. Have you got that? Has everybody got the strongest person? Has everybody got the strongest person? Now that person, decide which one is your strongest hand and raise it. All right. Make a fist. And you can put your hand down, but keep your hand in a fist. All right. The other people that weren't the strongest, you weaklings, you are going to have a different job. But the people with the closed fist, you are going to be closers. All right, we're going to do an exercise, and you are closers. The other people without the closed fist, you are openers. And when I tell you, I'm going to give you a little bit of time for the openers to get the closer's fist open. Now, in order to make this a little bit more interesting for people who will watch this later, could I get you 2 to come up here, and maybe Lisa and Bill to come up here, just to do it in camera range so they'll see what's happening here? You can stand on either side if you'd like. Would that be the best place, Steve? They're not going to have to talk yet. Come in this way a little bit. All right, so you've got which one is the closer, and you've got which one is the opener? Oh, that's so sweet. All right. Now, one of the things that's going to happen when I tell you to do this, you're going to have a little bit of time. Opener, get their fist open. When the time is up, I'm going to ring this cowbell, and when I do that, I want you to stop and pay attention. Please don't make me say I need more cowbell. All right. So ready, set, go.
No, he's not following directions.
Okay. All right. Raise your hand if you were an opener. Raise your hand if you were unsuccessful in getting their hand open. Anybody up here?
No, we were good.
Okay. You were unsuccessful?
I'm always unsuccessful.
You're always unsuccessful. All right. I'm going to ask you. You guys can go ahead and sit down if you'd like.
Okay.
Go ahead and sit down. Raise your hand if you were unsuccessful again. And what we're going to do is, if you don't mind talking about what you tried, we'll pass the microphones around and you can tell us what that experience was like. You've got one?
I asked him for a high five with his right hand.
It didn't work. All right, so that didn't work. What else didn't work?
I tried distraction, just trying to talk to her and get her mind off of holding her fist closed, and
Okay.
it didn't work.
It didn't work.
Wasn't enough time, I guess. I don't
Didn't
know.
work, all right. Who else was not successful?
I asked her if we could hold hands, and she gave me the other hand, so.
All right. Who else?
I tried to create a wedge by taking a pen and pushing it down.
Jamming it in there?
Didn't work.
And it did not work. Anybody else that was not successful? John? You tried kissing her and she slapped you with the other hand. All right, fair enough. Who was successful getting their hand open? Raise your hand if you were successful in getting their hand open. All right, now tell me, what did you do, Selena?
I asked him to open his hand, and he did.
And he did. All right, fair enough. Next.
I asked nicely. I asked nicely.
And she opened,
And
her,
she
hand.
opened her hand.
Okay, who else? Les.
I poured hot coffee on Dan's hand. No, I just took his wrist and bent it the other way.
Oh, okay, all right.
I told him if he would open his hand, I put a $5 bill in it. It worked.
And it worked. There you go. And he's got the money to prove it. Excellent. So here's the interesting thing about that. I gave you absolutely no rules. I didn't tell you closers that you had to keep your hand closed at all costs. And I didn't tell you openers the methods that you could use to get it open. But with the absence of communication, with the absence of information, you all made something up. Either there are no rules and I can do whatever I want, or there's no big deal about me opening my hand. If they ask me, I'll just open it. That's what we do in the workplace. That's what we do everywhere. In the absence of rules or communication, we create them. And because of the way our brain works, it wants very much to make us right. So we will look for all the evidence in the world to show that what we have decided is true. If you look at the difference between average leaders in the workplace and superior leaders, 90% of the difference is in their social skills, empathy, emotional intelligence. I created this exercise to help show one of those places where we can or may not be using enough of those social skills, that empathy. Where do you think in a workplace this exercise is kind of a metaphor? Where are situations where you go into something assuming this is what I have to do and find perhaps that might not be the case? Does anybody have any thoughts? Well, if you were to take this exercise into the workplace, where do you go in where I assumed these were the rules, but maybe there aren't?
Yeah, where I've seen it is when I was providing part-time CFO services, I'd see a company set a policy of wanting to reduce the age of their receivables, but nobody gave any instructions on how to do that, and often customers got antagonized because of a really nasty approach that was used in collection efforts.
And they thought that's just what you had to do.
Yeah, the goal was to get the age of the receivables down, so
And it didn't
that
matter
narrowed the focus to that, yeah.
who landed in the gutter in the process.
Right, exactly.
Glenda?
In my corporate experience, my corporate life, my boss used to frequently send me emails over the weekend. And I always thought that because my boss was sending me the emails that I needed to respond over the weekend. But one day I sat down and I talked to him about that, and he told me that wasn't the case. He was just trying to get it off his plate. But I just assumed because he was my boss, his position, and that, my next raise might be hinging on that, I thought I better answer those emails.
Sure, it makes sense. And many times the reason that you wouldn't have that conversation is because you assume it'll be a confrontation. And nobody wants to have a confrontation. People said, I'm really confrontation avoidant. I suppose there are certain people that really like that, but most people don't. When you go into it assuming it's going to be a conversation, it's a whole different bag of worms there.
Yeah.
Or bag of candy, actually. Any other ideas about ways that this can be applied in the workplace? Well, think about this. When you're faced with a situation, think about whether or not there are actually rules, or if maybe there are rules that you've made up in your own head. And in that case, question rather than assume. Just put it out there in terms of, well, what do you think? Do you think it was okay? Do you think it'd be okay if I opened my hand? Well, she didn't say. And in fact, in many cases when I've done this, a lot of people have called out, asked me questions. Well, what are we allowed to do? And in those cases, I'm not helpful. I won't give any help. But in truth, that's what the person should do, is give you whatever insight they can give you about those rules, if they even exist. Can you change your perspective? Instead of looking at yourself as the closer or the opener, look at yourself from the other person's perspective. What do they really need? What are they trying to accomplish with what they've been charged with doing? And can you look at it from their perspective? Is winning really important? In this case, it was fun, but it really didn't matter whether you won or lost. And there's so many situations in a work environment where winning really doesn't matter. We just get kind of caught up in the idea of winning. And finally, E4E is one of the best places on earth to lighten up. There's so many fun, humorous people in here, and it doesn't preclude being smart and successful and driven. And any time that you can take a situation and you can lighten up, what a great plan that is. So with the remaining couple of minutes, are there any questions that anybody has about this exercise or anything related to it? Yes. They're probably going to want you to grab that mic.
I think your point. You want to turn this on? Yeah. I think your point about looking at things from a different perspective is really powerful, because that's exactly what I was trying to do when I said, what is it that this guy really wants? What are the things that motivate him? And I think if you look in every one of these interactions in terms of either the pain that they have that they need to get rid of or the gain that they would like to have, it's going to be a lot easier to make those kinds of interactions work.
That's a really good point. And when you think about sales, instead of thinking about what we want to sell, but what they need fixed, it's the whole changing of the perspective. Anybody else?
Yes, your point about asking questions is really an important one. One of the things that I did when I was in corporate is that I would have my direct reports in a group meeting, and they would set their goals and priorities for the coming week. But one of the things I coached them on was that if I came up during the week with a new assignment and I forgot to tell them where it fit on the priority list, they were to ask me that question, so that there wasn't that miscommunication, that misinterpretation of what was really important and what wasn't. So it's something that we can do by granting other people permission to ask those questions, so we can remind them how important it is that we are on the same page in whatever it is we're trying to accomplish.
And you're so smart to set that up, because when you tell someone from the outside, look, if you don't get it, go ahead and ask me. That's fine. Because a lot of times we just don't even remember that we can. Everybody's moving so fast, so that's a wonderful way to handle that.
So we spend a lot of our time overcoming resistance when we want to work with people. We're trying to get something done, and we spend a lot of time where they're resisting what we want them to do. What I think we tend to underestimate is that most of the time we're creating the resistance because of the way we handle the situation. So if we would get better at asking questions around why people feel the way they do, to your point, what you're going to do is spend a lot less time handling resistance on the back end. Because once you get that resistance going on, now it's kind of like he said, she said. But if you do a better job asking good questions at the beginning, you'll spend less time of handling resistance on the back end.
That's a really good point. Curiosity is your friend in almost every situation.
This is something I've been thinking about as I'm entering into more corporate spaces. There are lots of social communication styles that get in the way of people sharing what they know. Mm-hmm. And so I'm thinking this might be helpful in the direction of just opening up. Like, I work with students who are predominantly Black, and I've had to learn from Black people to say, talk to me like I'm Black, pretend I'm Black, because Black people oftentimes will not say what they think because they have to conform to a corporate culture. just like women oftentimes have to conform to a corporate culture, or men have to conform to a corporate culture too. And so just learning how to ask a question in a way that opens up that space for the hidden rules to be revealed and for new ways of learning what people know.
Kevin, did you have one?
So in your exercise, Mark started with, hey, how about give me a high five with the right hand? It was out of the box, and it really got to the point of questioning the rules. So in your coaching, how pervasive do you see that people just follow the rules blindly in all those areas? Like, how pervasive is that for people?
It's interesting because it depends upon the person and their style. I grew up as a rule follower, and I still have a really hard time breaking out of trying to figure out what the rules are so I can follow them. And then there are other people who just never think that way. It's like rules are made for other people. And so it really is, and sometimes it's those creative people. Glinda pointing at John. I think there really are people on both sides of the both sides of that spectrum, and I wish and I work on being one of those people who is less likely to follow the rules, because I believe that's where the creativity comes. And when you don't realize there are rules, then I think it expands your creativity. And
to that point, I have an interesting story around that. This is probably 20 years old. So I'm in Chicago. I'm a supervisor. The person worked with me was one of my leaders, and I was coaching her on what I thought she should do, and being this, using my style of collaboration and all of these things. So finally, she just turned on me and just got really madder than hell and said, "Will you stop treating me that way?" I'm like what way? She said, "Just tell me what you want." And so, to your point, I really misdiagnosed, that communication style. And, eventually we got around to it. But initially, I was way off base.
And I understand my time is up. Thank you all very much.